I'm actually up here in Chicago getting ready. I spoke last night at the church. I speak tonight, next night, another night, Wednesday night at a creation group up in this area. And this is a brand new talk. I thought I'd do the same one for you guys that I'm doing for them. It's brand new, and there's not a whole lot of video in it. I love the video side of it, but I was afraid that, like I say, with the buffering and everything, it might not work. But this is an apologetic piece, and so it's called Homology Proves Evolution, Debunked. All right. You guys remember our debunked videos? Anybody remember the debunked videos? Fast paced, animated, that kind of a thing. Well, we've got 17 of them now, and so we're going to take that approach and deal with this. Now, I know you guys might be asking yourselves a couple questions. The first question is, why is he talking about this stuff? I mean, why would he talk about homology? Well, I know what a lot of people think. They're like, well, nobody cares, man. Nobody cares about this kind of stuff. And to be very honest with you, that's not so. Because what I'm seeing is that this is actually an area that's being used to get your generation to doubt the word of God a lot. And so that's why I'm going to deal with it, because it's nothing more than a tool that's being used to get a generation to doubt. God told us that he told us many things in parables, saying a sower went out to sow. And let me do this here so that, how do I lose my mouse when I do this. You lose your mouse. Huh. Where's my mouse? Huh. Now let me exit out of this. There, we got my mouse. Let me go to that. Let me go to that. Okay, and now I'm going to come back and still seeing the screen. And he told them many things in parables, saying a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up since they had no depth of soil. You guys have read this parable, and I know you're familiar with it, but think about it. There are those that aren't growing very well. Some grow quick, then they disappear. And then there's others that grow and they stay strong. But what is the difference? Why does it happen? We read that the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. And I'm afraid that what I see a lot with the younger generation, especially, is that there's not a lot of root. I've seen a lot of passion. I've done a lot of youth events, even over the last couple of years. Even in the midst, hello, Daniel. Even in the midst of the pandemic, I've done 6, 7, 8 camps, man. So it's been really going. And I see a lot of folks that have a lot of passion, but then they disappear very quickly when the craziness comes. This is one of the reasons I want to address this stuff. This is an interesting book that was released a few years ago that was a focus on your generation, most of you out there, asking them questions. And this is one of the interviews that this lady did. Many young people feel a disconnect between their church and what they experience outside of it, including science, pop culture, and sexuality. For example, half of 13 to 17-year-olds want to pursue a science-related career, yet only 1% of youth pastors say they have addressed any subject related to science in the last year. So this is one of the reasons I want to talk about homology, because it's something that is being used. And I think we can overcome it. I really do. And I'll show you how I believe so. The interviewer went on to say this, interviewee, Mike, 20, who was invited to tell a room full of pastors why he no longer affiliates with Christianity. I'm as nervous as an atheist at a pastor's conference, he began. But then he said it was 10th grade. I started learning about evolution. I knew from church that I couldn't believe in both science and God, so that was it. I didn't believe in God anymore. Now, I'd like to make this a little bit of interactive stuff here. And for whatever reason, when I am in my presentation mode, I can't see the thumbnail. So I've got to open this up. How many of you, and even feel free to talk or chat on this thing, how many of you would be in agreement with that statement? I knew from church that I couldn't believe in both science and God. How many of you would say, yep, yeah, that's accurate? Let me open up my chat here. Where's chat? Chat, there it goes. How many would say, and even, okay, yeah. How many of you would know how to overcome that statement? And would somebody be willing to step up here? And how would you overcome that? Somebody tells you, look, science and the Bible, they're not compatible. Science and God, you can't have both. You're going to have to make a choice here. You're going to have to choose science. You're going to have to choose God. You make a choice. Somebody willing to step up here and share with me how you would address that when you walk into the professor who is waiting to get Christian kids, loving to get Christian kids so they can chew them up and spit them out? Because I get these stories a lot. Anybody? Okay, Josh, why don't you come online and speak it?
Yeah, so I just said in the chat that science and the Bible are compatible, but science and evolution are not compatible.
Okay, but Josh, don't you understand that evolution is the cornerstone, it's the foundation of science. You can't do science if you don't believe that evolution is a fact. How in the world can you say that science and the Bible are compatible? The Bible's fairy tale and figment of imagination, where science is real stuff, man.
I would argue that evolution, it's historical science rather than observational science. And it very much depends. I mean, creationists and evolutionists all have the same evidence, but it depends on the worldview that you have when you look at the evidence and how you interpret it.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to jump in? Your chapel's scared of science. That's too sad. That's too bad, because science is amazing. I love it. Science means nothing more than knowledge. And how do you gain knowledge? You gain knowledge through the scientific method. The scientific method is make an observation, test it, repeat, and do it all over again. But unfortunately, we have this world that has been taught the lie that evolution is a requirement for. So now let me go back and find my presentation. There it is. I want to keep going on this. So the second thing is, and we're gonna keep fleshing that part out there. So the second part is, I gotta make this thing small again. There we go. And can you still see the presentation? Beautiful. So the second thing you might be saying to yourself is, what is homology? I mean, come on, what is it? Well, it's really not that complex of a thing. Homology, when you look at a definition for it, is pretty quite simple. It's just that the similarity of structures. I mean, I'm sure that every one of you have taken a biology class and you've seen these pictures. Even if you've not taken a biology class, you've seen these pictures because they are used everywhere to supposedly prove that, look, this thing turned into this thing, because they all have the same structure. So it essentially means this, all right? Now, can I have somebody do me a favor? Because when I've got this where I can see some faces, it blocks my text and I can't read it. So I need somebody to do me a favor and read this so that everybody can hear. Give me that volunteer with a good voice. Go for it. Go for it. Okay.
You need someone to read it.
Yeah, who's my voice?
So I can read it if you like.
Here you go. You go.
Homology, similarity of the structure, physiology, or development of different species or organisms based upon their descent from a common evolutionary ancestor.
So there you go. Homology proves that evolution is a fact, because look at the similarity in the structures. And that's really easy to see. Look, this is my dad and me. I mean, we look similar, right? I mean, and as I've grown older, I mean, I look similar to my dad, and now my children, they look similar to me. They look similar to their mom. And now we've got grandchildren, and look, you can see the similarities, except for that one little girl in the front with the blonde hair. She's a quarter Japanese, got blonde hair, blue eyes. What's that all about? That's a different talk. But anyway, you can see that there's similarities between us, because look, we started with my father, then he had me, and now I've got my children, they got their grandchildren. So there's similarities there because we all come back, well, to the same source. Here's something that I found interesting. I didn't know this when I first started this study. The history of homology, where did it come from? And it actually goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle. I mean, it goes all the way back then, but they didn't have the word homology. It didn't get really fleshed out until 1555, when a guy named Pierre Boulogne drew the first picture of in the book of birds. And you can see how he drew on one page a skeleton of a bird, and on the other, a skeleton of a human. And look, they've got the same skeletal structure. Wow. By the way, it was called the prophet of, what's he called the prophet of? This stuff blocks everything. Comparative anatomy, right? Yes, I'm going off my head here. So prophet of comparative anatomy. So what are we going to do? Well, I want to keep going through some of this dictionary definition. 1828 dictionary, guys. I would really encourage you when people bring up words and stuff that you don't understand, use an 1828 dictionary to kind of get a baseline. I love that, Angelina. That's true, and we're going to keep fleshing on that. Because one of the things that I found is that words have changed over time. If you really want to see evolution at its core, look at words. You check out the word evolution in an 1828 dictionary versus a modern day dictionary, the word science in an 1828 dictionary and a modern day dictionary. Matter of fact, you're going to see that's where real changes take place in the way that words are used. So 1828 dictionary, you look up homology and guess what? It's not there. You're not going to find it because it's a newer word. William Sharp Maclay is the guy that kind of fleshed it out even more. He was one of the first ones to really promote this similarity of structure, and he called it analogy and affinity. But what was interesting to me is that he was a Christian. He was a creationist. He strongly disagreed with evolution. He said that the similarities we saw were because of creation. Now, homology, though, actually came from a guy that is from your country, Sir Richard Owen. Who also invented the word dinosaur, meaning terrible lizard. So Sir Richard Owen invented that word dinosaur as well as homology. By the way, go to that 1828 dictionary, look it up, and you know what you're not going to find? You're not going to find the word dinosaur in there either because it wasn't invented until 1841. So it's also a modern word. But 2 years later, he came up with homology. And please, my voice that did so well the last time, please read this quote for us.
I can read it.
Thank you.
1843, introduced the term to refer to structural similarities among organisms. He defined a homologue, I think I read that right, as the same organ in different animals under every variety of form and function.
Okay, so this is the original definition of the word right here. He's the guy who invented the word, the original definition. Remember the other definition that we read? Was there a difference between that modern definition and this definition? Anybody remember? Nobody remember what the original definition was versus, or what the other definition is from this one?
Wasn't the other definition sort of comparing? Or what was it like? Because they're both comparing, but like one's sort of saying same organ, but the other one's saying similar organs and stuff like that, similar structures.
Daniel just threw it up in your chat there. Similarity of the structure, physiology, or development of different species of organisms based upon their descent from a common evolutionary ancestor. You see, this is where all of a sudden, as I wish I could remember names and everything, but the first gentleman that we're talking about historical science versus, historical versus, practical science that we do every day. This is the key right here. They redefined the term. They added this common ancestor thing. That was not in the original definition. It was just common structures that have similarities. And by the way, Sir Richard Owen maintained to the day that he died that evolution did not happen. He was everything that I've read about him, a brilliant guy, but he was pretty nasty. He was pretty nasty. He was not a nice guy to be on the wrong side of. He was pretty harsh. Matter of fact, he said that, and he didn't say this because they didn't have Honda Preludes back there, but a modern day analogy would be that the same way that a Civic and a Honda Prelude look similar, that's because they have a common creator. That's where Richard Owen was coming from, because Richard Owen was a creationist, big time creationist. This is one of his greatest creations. Do you guys know what that is? Hello?
No clue whatsoever.
You don't know what that is? This is in your great nation.
It's a building.
is
it a
the
school?
London
I think that's the
Museum
Natural
of
History Museum.
Natural History. It is beautiful. You've never been to the London Museum of Natural History, guys?
I've been there.
You've got to go. It's unbelievably beautiful. Sir Richard Owen's the guy that built that. Well, he was responsible. He didn't do the building, but you know what I'm saying. He was the guy who oversaw the building of it. He's the guy who designed this building. That's why it looks like a cathedral. He was bringing glory to God. Do you see glory to God when you go to the London Museum of Natural History today? Absolutely not. He's the guy that when it was being designed, he told them that he wanted this to show the wonder and awe of creation. Sir Richard Owen's the guy that designed it. And when it opened, it was based on the Romanesque cathedrals. And he said it had a great sense of reverence. And this was because he was bringing glory to God through the London Museum of Natural History. This is the main hall when you first walk in. And everybody's like, it looks like a cathedral, intentionally so, because he wanted to bring glory to God. That's how much he believed in creation. And you see right down in the very center there used to be a statue of Sir Richard Owen there. He was there. It's interesting what's happened, though. Something very interesting happened in 1859. Anybody want to take a guess what happened in 1859? Again, it's from your great country. Someone wrote a book.
Darwin wrote his first book, didn't he?
In 1859, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life was published. And it blew up. Firestorm, man, firestorm. So now, what was interesting is that Charles Darwin sent a copy of his book before it was published. He sent it to Richard Owen. Richard Owen looked at it, didn't say anything to him until he published it. Then he chewed him up and spit it out. Thomas Huxley, German guy, then came along and he took what Darwin was teaching and he started drawing these pictures of look at these similarities of structure. Look at the humans and the chimps and the orangutans. Look the gorillas. Oh my goodness, you can't tell them apart. You know what's interesting though? This was the way that he had the drawings, but I want you to see the actual skeletons. Very different. You notice one of the major differences? In his drawings, he showed the gorillas and the chimps and the orangutans walking almost upright, but that's not reality. They're knuckle draggers. They can walk upright for a little bit, but not for very long because it's a very uncomfortable gait for them because of their curvature of their hips. All right. When I was about most of y'all's age that are on here right now, my parents bought a series of books for me called Life Nature Library, right? And I can't believe it. 3 years ago, I started looking through my library. I've carried books with me for all these years, and this is one of the books that I still have. This was the book that I didn't know until I looked inside of it, that the very first chart depicting the evolution of humans was promoted in. Have any of you ever seen that picture? Anybody? Show me some yeses on the chat if you guys have seen this picture. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. This right here is the granddaddy that every one of those charts that you've seen depicting the ape turning. What's his like the Egyptian? Every chart that you see, this is where it started. This is called the March of Progress. Okay. March of Progress. And there it is, Carl. This chart was sold to schools all over the globe. They didn't buy the book. They bought the chart and they hung the chart in the science rooms. I grew up with this chart. And the one thing I never did is I never read it. I never read it. I looked at the picture. It's like, oh my goodness, how are you going to argue with that? It's so clear. Ape-like ancestor, given enough time, turns into humans. Well, I got the book and I read it for the first time. When you bought just the chart, you didn't get this part that you see here. Take a look at what they actually write right there. All right. Although proto-apes and apes were quadrupedal, all are shown here standing for the purpose of comparison. Huh. What does that mean? The proto-apes and apes are quadrupedal. Huxley showed them walking upright. Same thing they did here. If you take everyone that you see on the screen right now, from Pliopithecus all the way to A. robustus, Australopithecus robustus, every one of those are apes. They're quadrupedal, every one of them. And notice that they only show one of them being quadrupedal. None of those walked upright. It was a lie. That picture is a lie. It's still a lie. And it's still being used, by the way. There's another interesting quote, or not an interesting quote, but when you read, this is actually in the text below. Those highlights that I'm putting up there for you, those are in the text underneath those individual ancestors. Ancestor of the gibbon line. If it's an ancestor to the gibbon, is it in the human lineage? No. Ancestor of the chimpanzee and perhaps of the gorilla. If it's an ancestor of the chimp and the gorilla, is it in the human lineage? No. Her had a few jaws and teeth. That's it. Dryopithecus. If you do any study on that now, it's been kicked totally out to the curb. Clearly an aberrant ape, Oreopithecus. And that's not the Oreo monster. You know, you got the Cookie Monster, Oreopithecus. You guys, you know the Cookie Monster. Come on, Sesame Street's made it over there too. No, guys, when you look at that, not a one of those is even in the human lineage. Not a one of them walked upright. Not a one of them is in the human lineage, but every one of them are on the march to progress, showing how an ape-like ancestor turned to humans. You're being lied to, guys. Don't trust me. Go study these things for yourself. Charles Darwin said this. All right, I need my voice to jump in here because I get that my picture's all blocked. Who's the young lady that's reading for me?
I can read it. A structure is similar among related organisms because those organisms have all descended from a common ancestor that had an equivalent trait.
Okay, who's the young lady who's reading for me?
Angelina Dunn here.
Angelina, thank you, Miss Angelina. I'll call on you because I'm going to have you read because my quotes are all covered up here. Oh, okay. So we have Charles Darwin saying that these things are similar because they all come from a common ancestor. Now think about this for a second. Oh, by the way, I told you Richard Owen took a look at the Origin of Species before it was published, and he chewed it up and spit it out after it was published. He didn't let Darwin know he was going to do it. So he and Darwin were at odds the rest of their lives, did not like each other. Because he said, this is not scientific at all. You have all these statements of I believe and I'm convinced. That is not scientific. So they were at odds. So Richard Owen makes the London Museum of Natural History. He's got a statue up there. 1859, Charles Darwin publishes his book. Huxley starts promoting. Evolution explodes. He retired. Sir Richard Owen retired in 1882. And guess what happened? 2 years later, Thomas Huxley gave the speech when they put Charles Darwin's statue there. So if you've ever been to the London Museum of Natural History, what do you see now? You see Charles Darwin's marble statue there. That wasn't there to begin with. What did they do with Sir Richard Owen? They kicked him to the curb, took him off his pedestal even, and have a good time trying to find his statue. But it is still there. They've got it somewhere. Last I heard, it was over by the cafeteria somewhere, but it's stuck off in the middle of nowhere. By the way, I think this is something that Christians need to recognize and realize. The world is not going to like us, and they're going to make fun. They're going to mock. They're going to do anything and everything they can to ridicule. And they might kick you to the curb. They might hide you in a corner somewhere. But you know what? I'm not here to make the world happy. I'm here to make God happy. Stand firm in your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and his word, and be bold in a culture that needs to know there's another way. Your culture is under attack, the same as mine. And ours is blowing up right now. It's crazy stuff going on. But you know what? That's okay. Because the darker it gets, the brighter we should shine. Don't run and hide. So homology, I mean, come on, man. It's got to be true. Everybody knows. It's like these things all look alike. Well, I'm not that easily swayed. There are two ways to explain how you got these similarities of structures, okay? Two ways. One of them is common descent, right? Common descent. What's that mean? Started with an ape-like ancestor. We saw the chart march of progress. Given enough time, we got humans. The other is common designer. And what does common designer teach? Well, that you started with ape-like creatures and apes stayed apes and humans stayed humans. What does the actual evidence support? Well, that's one of the talks that I've done for you guys many times over there is the fossil talk. When you look at the actual fossil evidence, it screams that God did what he said that he did. One thing stayed one thing, never changed from or into anything else. Yes, you've got things that look similar, but they're still different. But guess what? We're all still human, all still dogs. Similar, yes, but different, yes. So the evidence actually supports what God says. Oh, by the way, Tim Barra would absolutely disagree with me. He wrote a book called Evolution and the Myth of Creationism. In there, he gave this example, because I want to give you real world stuff. This is what you'll run into when you run into these science guys. Here it is, Carl, evolution's a fact. And Miss Angelina, can you read this quote?
I'll get it, yeah. If the Australopithecines, Homo habilis, and Homo erectus were alive today, and if we could parade them before the world, there would be no doubt about our relatedness to them. It would be like attending an auto show. If you look at 1953 Corvette and compare it to the latest model, only the most general resemblances are evident. But if you compare a 1953 and a 1954 Corvette side by side, then a 1954 and a 1955 model, and so on, the descent with modification is overwhelmingly obvious. This is what paleontologists do with fossils, and the evidence is so solid and comprehensive that it cannot be denied by reasonable people. Tim Barra.
Thank you, ma'am. Who are my unreasonable people out there that want to disagree with this statement? Anybody?
I disagree, because one thing is what they tend to do with these fossils is they upscale them or downscale them. So like they say that they're similar, but really they're not in many ways.
Okay. Anybody else? Jump in. How would you argue against this? Come on, man. It's so easy to see.
Well, to start with, it's actually a weak analogy, because 53 Corvettes don't pass on genetics to the next generation, do they? So it's a terrible analogy in that regard.
Take a look. There's a 53 Corvette. There's a modern day Corvette. And there's some similarities, but they're different. See, this proves that evolution is a fact. Hello? Where are my lone voices crying out in the wilderness? Look, 53, 54, tough to tell them apart. 53, 54, 55. It's very tough to tell them apart. You see, evolution is a fact.
It's a very weak analogy, I think, really.
Why?
Well, because cars aren't the same as people. It can't be the same, because according to evolution, they pass down their genes, but cars are complete new things in themselves. So it doesn't even match with evolution. What they're trying to say is one thing. And another thing is, well, the cars have a creator anyways. So
there you go.
It's not like they evolve.
There you go. As a minimum, this supports, as Mr. Andrew just said, intelligent design. As a minimum, there's intelligent design in this whole process. Somebody came along and did this, and they've tweaked it, So guess what? That supports intelligent design. Does not support naturalistic processes. You see, this is exactly what Richard Owen was saying to begin with. These similarities that we see are because there's a common designer. He followed a basic plan that worked, but then you tweak this, you tweak that to make it a little bit better there, a little bit better here. That's exactly what he said. So common descent, common designer. It could be both, right? It could be either one. So which one is it? Well, that depends on how you define it. And this is something that's very interesting. Again, I know I'm hammering this definition thing, but it's very important that you and I are using a word that we both, when I'm talking to somebody that disagrees with me, that we have the same meaning of the word. For an example, I got saved as a Christian in Salt Lake City, Utah. Does that mean anything to anybody? If you know anything about Salt Lake City, Utah, it is famous for Mormonism. Christianity and Mormonism use the same words, but have completely and totally different meanings. That's right, Kat. So totally different meanings. Even though I say Jesus loves you, they say, oh yeah, Jesus loves me. But who is Jesus? You can use the same words and have two totally different meanings. And that's what we have to be very careful about, even in this case. So let's go back to our dictionaries and we know that we don't have homology in there, but how about in an 1840, I forget the year on this one. Anyway, correspondence or relation and type of structure versus modification of a trait possessed by a common ancestor. Do you see the difference? Since evolution is now quote unquote a fact and everybody knows it, And no reasonable person can disagree with it because we have 53 Corvettes looking like 55 Corvettes and so on and so forth. Wow. Modification of a trait possessed by a common ancestor. This is why when you and I use the word homology, yeah, I believe it's true. Yeah, there's similarity of structures that come from a common designer. But no, not anymore. Now you have to have a common ancestor by the latest definition. And this is where it gets really, really kind of fun. It's like Britannica says you have to have descent from a common ancestor. So you have these common traits because of a common ancestor. But here's something that I wondered about, okay? This is my mind, it's weird. How did we get homology, similarity in structure that requires a common ancestor? So think about this. You've got a common ancestor, has common traits, and then it changes over time, and some of these traits go with that. Then the only way to make descent with modification is to redefine the words. And is there any evidence to support this belief? And the mechanism of descent with modification, would it lead to what we see today? Those are the two things that I want to address. Well, the evidence, does it support it? Let's take a look. I told you about the debunked videos. This is one of our newer ones. What is this, number 16, I think? I can't see the number on there. The fossil record proves evolution. So I'm going to play a video for you here. And I really pray that it works. I hope the audio comes through. If it doesn't, just kind of let me know, and then I'll tell you where you can go watch it anyway, and you don't have to watch it on here. So this just addresses the fossil record.
We've unearthed millions of fossils around the world. So with all this evidence, so to speak, it's clear that the fossil record proves evolution, right? Well, actually, no. Didn't when Darwin was alive and hasn't since he's been gone. In fact, Chucky D himself knew this when he wrote the following: geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. And this, perhaps, is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record. Okay, but surely after all the time since Darwin, digging and discovering fossil after fossil, we have a more perfect geological record that supports evolution, right? Not even close, bud. Listen to how two renowned evolutionary biologists summarize the truth. Instead of finding the slow, smooth, and progressive changes, they saw in the fossil record rapid bursts of change, new species appearing seemingly out of nowhere and then remaining unchanged for millions of years, patterns hauntingly reminiscent of creation. The fossil record doesn't show gradual change, and every paleontologist has known that ever since Cuvier, or however you pronounce that. Okay, I could go on, but there's always going to be opposing views because on both sides of the debate, the same evidence is interpreted through different worldviews. You got to remember that, people. Facts don't say anything. People say things based on their interpretation of facts influenced by their worldview. But that's a whole other subject, and I don't want to get into it right now. Instead, hey, let's have a little fun and take a look at some popular secular articles and charts on the fossil record and see if we can learn to separate facts from interpretation of facts by asking a few simple questions. Question 1, did the artiste take any artistic license with what I'm looking at here? Check this out, because this happens all the time. Look, isn't that sweet? So cute and fluffy. Okay, why do you think the artist made these creatures appear more human-like by throwing in an affectionate smile and depicting them hanging out like a human family going to a picnic or something? Why did he draw them walking upright? Why make the shapes and colors of their eyes more human than ape? Is any of it based on actual fossil evidence? Of course not. But if you want the story of evolution to appear more convincing, you just might fill in missing gaps with your presuppositional imagination. Just saying. Question 2, is the attention-grabbing headline or title supported by actual facts? For instance, take a look at this popular book called Why Evolution is True. We don't even have to go any further than the jacket on this one, because on it you got a dino evolving into a bird in 3 simple steps. There you go. But then on the inside, this is written, and I kid you not. The jacket depicts a chronological sequence of fossils showing the evolution of birds. We do not know whether the actual line of descent included, now wait for it, the first 3. Say what now? Doesn't that mean these 3 shouldn't be on the cover then? Which means all you got is a modern bird, right? No evolution, just a bird. Talk about worldview filling in gaps. On to question 3. What do the graphics on evolutionary charts indicate? I mean, they sure do look convincing. For instance, on this one from the dinosaur book, you've got solid red columns and white columns showing gradual progression over time. But let's read the almost imperceptible 2-point font over here. It reads, tinted areas indicate solid fossil evidence, which means the white areas represent No solid fossil evidence, right? Okay, then take them away. Uh-oh, looks like patterns hauntingly reminiscent of creation, I'd say, right from your own charts. And the same thing goes for the dotted lines on this one. Look at all of them. Just so we're clear, dotted lines indicate zero evidence. Remove them, and what do you get? No transitional forms or evidence of gradual progression. A bat is a bat, a kangaroo is a kangaroo, and a horse is a horse. Of course, unless, of course, the horse is Mr. Ed. Look, people, all I'm saying here is if you got facts, put them in there. If you don't, leave them out. But don't draw downright dubious, daft, dare I declare, dunderheaded dotted lines of deliberate deception dogmatically and dastardly doodle to disguise definitive data. No, just admit what you actually see. Overwhelming evidence of living things, according to their kinds, suddenly appearing, which, as a reminder, is exactly what the Bible teaches. Now, I don't even have time to get into TV, movies, and documentaries. All I ask is that you use the same line of questioning when you watch them. And in summary, we agree with Mr. D. Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. Not then, not now, not ever. And that means the whole idea that the fossil record proves evolution has been debunked. Adios.
All right. I know that's a lot of information thrown at you very quickly. Let me ask you a question, though. By show of yeses in the chat room, if I give this to you for free, would you take it and use it? Let me see. Anybody want it? Anybody? Okay, nobody wants it. Fine, I can skip it. Would you want it if I give it to you? If I give it to you, would you use it and share it with a friend?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm gonna give it to you. Here's how you get it. You need to write this. Can I write in here? Yes, I can. Then all you need to do is go to, no space. Want to be, that's where you need to go. Getdebunked.com. You'll see a link up there for the videos, and you can watch all the videos for free. There's 17. The new one's coming out in about 2 weeks. Dealing with the abortion issue. And the way that we're addressing it is different. It's different. Probably going to catch some flack on it, but that's okay. I think we're solid biblically. So if we're not biblical, then I'll take all the flack and do something to change it. But if we're biblical, people can get mad. We just got to speak the truth in love. So take a look at that. By the way, also go to get.com/ I'm giving you another link here. We just did about 3 months ago, 5 months ago now. I got super frustrated because here, I don't know how it is over there. I kind of have an idea, but we've been shut down, right? I mean, shut down. But we had all this protesting going on. I mean, people were out burning and looting and rioting. But if you wanted to go out and do something Christian, you're getting in trouble. So I got super frustrated because I was like, hold up. Satan's not staying at home. Satan's burning and looting, and the Christians are hiding. Forget this. I'm not staying at home. So I got 8 people. We went down to Florida. We have a bus, an old 68, 69 Volkswagen bus that we've decked out. It looks pretty cool. And we take that out on the street, and it's a magnet. It draws people, and we get in conversations. So we took 8 people, traveled every day, went to a different church, trained their people, went out on the street, did street evangelism, recorded it, and we turned it into a documentary. And getdebunked.com/thebus. Go there. You can watch that documentary free. Pray for us. I'd love to come over to England sometime and do this over there as well. But that's where you can get these things. And so take advantage of it. I won't do this one with you because it won't work for you. So the evidence, does it support that belief? No, it doesn't. What about the mechanism? Descent with modification from a common ancestor, could that lead to what we see today? Now, before I go, John, what time do you need me to finish? I know we got started late and I want to be respectful of your time. So you give me the time you want me to finish.
Just keep going. And I guess people, if they need to go, they can go. But I think the general consensus would be keep going. Okay.
If you got to walk out on me, I'm used to it. I'm used to people walking out, so don't worry about it. Here we go. All point mutations that have been studied at the molecular level reduce genetic information and not increase it. Now, I want you to think about this. Common ancestor, descent with modification, you've got this trait that's passed on to the next generation, passed on. But hold up. In order to get a worm to grow legs, think about this. What has to happen? You have to get new genetic information. Worms don't have the genetic information for legs. They've got to get this new genetic information from someplace. Where did it come from? Not from a mutation, because not even one mutation has been observed that adds a little information to the genome. So where did it come from? You know, well, Charles Darwin says that, remember, descended from a common ancestor that had an equivalent trait. If that's the truth, think about this for 1 second. This is the way my mind works. Common ancestor, equivalent trait, that's why we have these things that look similar. Then what's the equivalent trait between nothing and something? Because that's what evolution teaches. That was the other talk I was thinking about doing, but there's so much video in there. Nothing turned itself into something. What common trait is there between those two? How about this one? A worm to a fish. What common trait is there in between a worm and a fish? Because you had to get that gill and fins and all that from a worm. And every one of these steps, guys, every one of these steps, when they tell you that, you know, common ancestor has an equivalent trait because it came from that common ancestor, there's no common traits between these things. A fish crawling out on the land to become an amphibian, to turn into a rat, to turn into a wolf-like animal, to go back into the ocean, to become a blue whale, which, by the way, you can drive a Volkswagen Beetle through the artery of a blue whale's heart, right? You can drive a Volkswagen Beetle through it, and that came about by a 2.5-inch long mouse named Morgie having mutations. Look, you're free to believe that, but I'm just saying, man, I'm not going there. You think believing in God is ridiculous? This is what's ridiculous. People tell me that we know that there's evolution because there's homology. Homology, the similarity of structures, that's because of evolution. But we know that there's homology because evolution is true. Hello? Do you see a problem with that, guys? I use homology to prove evolution, but I use evolution to prove homology. That's one of the big attacks against Christians. You use the Bible to prove the Bible. That's circular reasoning. You can't do that. By the way, I want to get some interaction on this because I think you're going to run into this if you especially talk to any college theology kind of guy. Is it circular reasoning to use the book of John to show that the book of Matthew is true? Is that circular reasoning? Is it circular reason to use the Bible to prove the Bible? Anybody want to jump in? Right.
No, because there's other historical records that can back up what the Bible says. So there isn't just one account, but there are multiple accounts.
See, this is the thing that we have to remember. I love the comments here. All functional mutations alter the function of the gene in question. Is that hey Josh, is that a quote that you just made up, or is that so? Are you quoting somebody on that?
Which quote was that? Sorry.
That's a quote you made up?
What quote are you referring to? Sorry.
All functional mutations alter the function of the gene in question. Therefore, there can never be an entirely positive mutation because it always has some consequence of the original function of the gene.
Oh yeah, I just came up with that.
That's exact. It's great. It's a great quote. It's absolutely right on the money. Good job. And yes, Becca, that's the key. They were written by different people at different times. The Bible is a book, yes, but it has how many different authors? And there's nothing wrong with using one eyewitness to verify what another eyewitness says. And by the way, if somebody tells you, well, they contradict each other, we can go study those contradictions, and that's not true. Just because I tell you that there's 2 people here, I talk about 2 people there, somebody says there's 3 people there, that's not a contradiction. I didn't say that there were only 2. And when you read scripture, that's what you find. People talk about, they mention these 2, but they don't talk about this person. There are some things we can't fully understand. I'll give you that, but we don't have as big a problem as this right here. So think about this for a second. You can't have evolution because, we know homology is true because evolution is true. We know evolution is true. No, that is circular reasoning, guys. It does not work, and it is not the same as with the Bible. Now, some of you might be yelling at me, especially the skeptical folks, if we got any skeptics on here, which I pray we do. Carl, there's nobody teaches that. They don't teach that. We know that common ancestor proves evolution and evolution proves common ancestry. No, that nobody teaches that. I looked it up on Talk Origins, which, by the way, is a very anti-Christian creationist site. I beg to differ. Here's what I did. These are quotes from actual textbooks. I don't know if they're used in your country or not, but they're used here. And you take a look at the quotes. What do they teach? Exactly that. Homology is evidence of a descent from a common ancestor. We have common ancestors because of homology. How about another one? How about this one? Exact same thing. How about this one? And I'm not reading them to you because we could be here for a very long time, but you can read them very quickly for yourself. And what you're going to find, I can show you, I've got about 17 different biology textbooks that is exactly what they teach. Common ancestry proves evolution, evolution proves common ancestry, and they use the two. These are the quotes from their books, guys. Such similarity in structural is common ancestry is called homology structures, anatomical descent, signs of descent with modification. It's everywhere. And by the way, it's not just in the textbooks. If you go do a search, just go do a search, evidence for evolution, right? Evidence for evolution, because wait, there's more. If you do the search, here's what you're going to find. I did the search and I'm just pulling up some sites that I found, and the evidence that is used overwhelmingly is homology. This proves evolution. We know evolution is true because of the common ancestry. Common ancestry is proof that there's evolution over and over again. It's the two are almost synonymous with each other. So you go take a look and see who's telling you the truth on that one. I see it all the time. It is used. But here's something that's funny. Hold up. Using homology to prove evolution is not circular reasoning. We have a new word here that I'd never heard of until I started researching this. It's called reciprocal illumination. Yes.
Illumination. Illumination. Oops.
So reciprocal illumination, that's not circular reasoning. Yes, what are we going to do? Well, so what is that all about? I'm sorry, man. I know, I like the menus. I think they're kind of cute. All right, Miss Angelina, I need you to read this quote for me, please.
All right. Assessing homology corroboration within its framework relies on the principle of reciprocal illumination, Hennig, 1966, in which each individual hypothesis is evaluated by the extent to which it agrees with the overall favored hypothesis given all available data.
So that's reciprocal illumination. We take what we see, we compare it to what we already believe, and then that's what we're going to accept. But you don't know this is true. It's really bad. It's a really bad attempt at trying to get around circular reasoning, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But by the way, even the non-Christian community knows it doesn't work. R.H. Brady, in an argument or in an article that he wrote on the independence of systematics, he says, "Look, it doesn't work. We can't do that. It isn't working. We know it. Bottom line is it doesn't work." That's what he's telling us. It doesn't work. Now, why doesn't it work? Well, when you read another quote here, this goes all the way back to 1947. Miss Angelina, I need you again. I'm sorry, my pictures are all covered.
Okay. Homology and analogy, a critical review of the meanings and implications of these concepts in biology. Some recommend that we define homology as any similarity due to common ancestry, as though we can know the ancestry independently of the analysis of similarities.
You can't know. They don't know what the original things look like. So it's smoke and mirrors. Matter of fact, NCSC, which is the largest anti-creation group here in America, they say homology is not evidence for common ancestry. Common ancestry is inferred based on many sources of information and reinforced by the patterns of similarity and dissimilarity. Here's the evidence that they use: biogeography, embryology, whale evolution, vestigial organs, antibiotic resistance. Oh my goodness, we could go through every one of those. I know that we don't have time to do that, but let's just take one that's near and dear to our heart, okay? I think I actually changed this. mosquito resistance to pesticides, right? I've heard of this, but I think I changed it. No, I did. Okay. Have you ever heard this? Mosquitoes evolve resistance to pesticides? Anybody? Give me some yeses or hands or whatever. You've heard that? Okay. So how do we deal with it? Here's how you deal with it. It's really not that difficult. In the world today, we have mosquitoes that have resistance to DDT, or I can't say DDT, that's illegal to use anymore. Pesticides. All right. So we have mosquitoes that have a resistance to pesticides, and we have mosquitoes that don't have a resistance to pesticides. So I want you to imagine now, we have a bunch of mosquitoes. We don't like mosquitoes. We want to get rid of mosquitoes. What do? We spray them. So we come in and we spray them with a pesticide. What's going to happen when we spray that group of mosquitoes with a pesticide? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. You're going to kill off some of the mosquitoes. Which of the mosquitoes are you going to kill off for the most part? The ones that don't have the resistance. The ones that do have the resistance continue on. And they keep breeding. And over time, guess what we get? We get a lot of mosquitoes again. So what are we going to do? Yay. We're going to come back. We're going to spray them again. What's going to happen this time? Are we going to kill off as many mosquitoes this time as we did the last time? No. Why? Because they've evolved resistance to a pesticide? Look, you can keep spraying mosquitoes so they get to the point that you spray them and they're like, bring it on, baby. It's a sour day. They drink it like Gatorade. Doesn't bother them at all. They're loving it. Hey, can I have a little more? Right? Why? They didn't evolve anything. They already had the resistance to the pesticide. And all you did was kill off the ones that didn't have the resistance, and the ones that did have the resistance. That's it. You're going to tell me that that process right there is the process by which a worm grew legs to crawl out of the land and become an amphibian? You've already heard me say that. You don't want me to hear it. You don't want to hear it again. Guys, what's that got to do with antibiotic resistance? I know what you're thinking. Well, it's the same process. It's the same process. If you've got a bacteria that has a resistance to penicillin and you try to use penicillin to kill it, well, you've got some that don't have it, some do. You kill off the ones that don't. Pretty soon you're going to have some that can resist all kind of things, man. So it's not a big problem. But what about this? Man versus ape. Have you heard this claim that we're 98% similar with a chimp? Anybody ever hear that? How would we deal with that one? Ooh-wee. I'm going to take you to a secular video, non-Christian video here, and they explain the process because I think, and by the way, you're right, Miss Angelina, they are still mosquitoes, okay? But how about this? 98% similar, what can we do? This proves that apes and humans came from a common ancestor.
It's often said that we humans share 50% of our DNA with bananas, 80% with dogs, and 99% with chimpanzees. Taken literally, those numbers make it sound like we could pluck one cell from a chimp and one from a human, pull out the tangled bundles of DNA known as chromosomes, unroll each one like a scroll, and read off two nearly identical strings of letters. But in reality, the human and chimp scrolls don't sync up so easily.
Uh-oh, 98% similar, not so quick. How do they get us to be 98% similar with the chimpanzee? Please listen carefully to this next part, because if I said this to you, you wouldn't believe me. I want you to see what they did. And this is not a Christian video here. This is not a Christian video, okay? This is what they had to do to make us 98% similar.
In the 6 to 8 million years since we split from our last common ancestor, chance mutations and natural selection have changed each of our genomes in radical and unique ways. 2 human scrolls fused, leaving us with 23 pairs of chromosomes to chimps' 24. Other large mutations revised huge sections of text, duplicating a chunk of human DNA here, erasing a chunk of chimp DNA there, while throughout the scrolls, tiny mutations swapped one letter for another. When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all.
Hello? Are you still there? In order to make us 98% similar with a chimpanzee, they had to take away, just completely get rid of 1.3 billion letters of information. Oh, that's not too bad. I mean, come on, what's 1.3 billion among friends? I mean, in our national debt, that's just like, we spend that every 2 seconds, right? Guys, 1.3 billion letters of information you had to get rid of completely. Do you know how that breaks down? Listen to this next part. This is how they break it down, because they had to take some from the human and some from the chimp. And just please listen.
And performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
Hello? Are you still there? 18% of the chimp get rid of, 25% of ours. And then, oh, can't you believe it? We line up 98.77% with them. The Staffords, where can you find this video? Do a YouTube search on human and chimp DNA similarities, and it will come up. It's a secular video, what they call it, 1 minute something or another. You'll see it. It's just do a YouTube search. It's one of the popular ones. It'll be up towards the top. It's extremely well done and extremely informative if you listen carefully. Most people just listen to this and say, oh yeah, see, we're 98.77% similar. Yeah, but you had to take out 1.3 billion letters of information, 18% of the chimp DNA, 25% of the human DNA to make us similar. I'll let them finish.
And there's another problem. Just as a small tweak in a sentence can alter its meaning entirely, or not at all, a few mutations in DNA sometimes produce big changes in a creature's looks or behavior, whereas other times, lots of mutations make very little difference. So just counting up the number of genetic changes doesn't really tell us that much about how similar or different two creatures are.
Daniel, thank you for looking it up. Josh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Josh, here's a way that I illustrate this, because, you know, most of you remember me. I'm kind of weird, if you can't tell by this anyway. And those of you that don't know me, I'm weird. But I love kind of tweaking things, like so here's what I do. I'll ask you guys, same thing I ask people. Any of you in here ever been driving in an automobile and it starts to rain? Anybody? Let me see. Yeses, any yeses? You've been driving and the rain starts coming down. Okay, Becca, yep, Josh. Okay, so Becca, Josh, Angelina, as you were driving and the rain started hitting your windshield, the very first thing that came to your mind was, I better get under an underpass because my window might get busted out by a watermelon. Is that, let me see, is that what you thought? Is that no, nobody thought that? You didn't, Becca, you didn't think that? No, what's wrong with you people? Don't you understand that a watermelon and a raindrop are 98% similar? So one of these days, yeah. You see, it's not the 98% that's similar that's the problem. It's the 2% that's dissimilar. They're so dissimilar, there's no way they came from the same source. So Josh, I think you're right on the money with that. And we need to point that out to people. Let's let this last video play here because it's classic.
We may not actually be 99% chimp, but we are 100% great ape.
If you can't get it to work one way, we'll bring it another way. So guys, I think it's a great video that you can use with your friends that use this argument that we're 98% similar. So you might also be saying to yourself, Self, why is he talking about this stuff? Because
I mean, it's really amazing. It means that it means that the fact that the universe is more remarkable than the fairy tales that were talked about by Bronze Age literate peasants before we knew the Earth orbited the sun.
You're not attacking at all, but go ahead.
No, but I mean,
but Les, so you say, so you believe there's no God?
I don't even use the word believe. The point is
there is no God.
There's no need for God.
Is there God? Is there God?
It's
what would you say?
There's no evidence for God.
Okay.
There's no evidence for God.
There you go. There's no evidence for God. But we got plenty of evidence for evolution because of homology. Let's see. Miss Angelina, could you read this quote for me, please?
Yep. This is the new norm. More and more, this younger generation is not even considering the gospel of Jesus Christ because they've been taught a worldview that supposedly proves that it can't be true.
These guys, the Bill Nyes, I don't know who you. Richard Dawkins has kind of disappeared. He's gotten older. I haven't seen a whole lot new come from him. He seems to pop up every once in a while, but these guys, they keep bringing stuff up, and it's bad. So Richard Dawkins.
The book uses the metaphor.
Sorry, I did want to use Richard Dawkins because his book that he wrote was very interesting, and take a look, because there's no evidence for God. There's no evidence for God. Watch.
The book uses the metaphor of a detective coming on the scene of a crime after it's happened. He can't see the crime, but he knows from looking at all the clues that remain that so-and-so did it. It's like that with scientists and evolution. We can't see evolution happening because we don't live long enough. But we look at the clues that remain, and they all overwhelmingly point to the same conclusion. Evolution is a fact.
So there it is. No evidence for God, but we've got plenty of evidence for evolution. And it's like a detective that comes on the scene and he sees all these pieces and ties them all together, and he can determine who did the killing because of all these little pieces. You know what's interesting to me? Here, Richard Dawkins in his book uses the analogy of the detective, right? Cold case detective, solving the crime to prove his point. This is a real cold case detective right here. Detective J. Warner Wallace. I've done conferences with him. Very sharp guy. As a matter of fact, I would highly encourage you guys, look up his books, Cold Case Christianity. It is an apologetic book from a very unique perspective, a cold case detective. And cold case means cases that have been closed for years, okay? So most of the time, the witnesses are dead. There's nobody left, but they give these cases to these guys to go back and try to solve them one more time. And this guy does that. He's a real detective. What does he say about the claim that there's no evidence for God?
Is there really no evidence for God's existence? I think in a world in which people are most persuaded by scientific quote unquote claims, right? I mean, science is the arbiter of all truth in the culture we're living today. I hear this all the time. Well, you cannot prove God's existence with evidence. Is that true? Is there no evidence for the existence of God? Well, I learned one thing working criminal trials. There's only two forms of evidence, right? There's direct evidence and indirect evidence. That's it. That's every form of evidence that we use when making a case in front of a jury. Direct and indirect evidence. Now, direct evidence is of one kind. It is eyewitness testimony. If it's not an eyewitness who can tell you what happened, who did it, he can describe the entire event for you, then you can't use direct evidence. Now, indirect evidence is everything else. And in cases like mine, DNA evidence, that's indirect. Fingerprints, indirect evidence. Behaviors people observed, indirect evidence. Statements he made, indirect evidence. Unless it's an eyewitness who can tell you what happened, everything else is indirect evidence. But by the way, there's no such category as hard evidence, so please stop saying that. We don't have hard evidence and soft evidence. There's direct evidence and indirect evidence. Now, could we make a case for God's existence from direct and indirect evidence? I think you could. Direct evidence might include, for example, eyewitness accounts, even if they're written down over a period of time. We have 4 Gospels that provide us with direct evidence, eyewitness accounts, and we can test those. But that's one way to determine if, by the way, if there's a person historically who rose from the grave with the power of God, and you have an eyewitness account that chronicles that, and if you test the eyewitness account and it passes all with flying colors, why would you not consider that to be sufficient evidence to believe that God exists? But if that's not the way you want to go, and you want to go with indirect evidence, well, if we're in a universe where all space, time, and matter leapt into existence from nothing, that universe that resulted appears to be fine-tuned to a razor's edge for the existence of life. Not only that, life emerges from non-life in a way that is still yet, no one can explain that even now. There are origin of life studies that still cannot explain how life emerges from non-life. And when it does emerge, it has a very commonly held observation that biology displays at least the signs of design, the attributes of the appearance of design, but also we're in a universe in which we have minds that act freely. We are in a universe that has objective, transcendent moral truths. We are in a universe in which we sense the presence of evil or the existence of evil. And we have to have some type of high moral standard of righteousness to even detect such a thing. Look, these are indirect attributes of the universe that we could make a case. We could use these as evidence to make a case for the existence of God. Because it turns out that if there is a God, he is the best explanation for those attributes of the universe. And that's all we're trying to do in a crime scene, right? Is figure out which suspect will best explain the evidence in our crime scene. It turns out that you can make a case for God from both direct and indirect evidence.
So Richard Dawkins wants to tell a story using a detective that's not real to prove that there's no God. I just gave you a real detective that uses the exact same skill set and shows you that, yes, there is absolutely evidence for God. Again, I cannot more highly recommend his books. Let me show that to you. I think I've got it right here. Yeah, right here. Cold Case Christianity. It is absolutely worth a read. It's well done. I disagree with him. I'll be very open. I disagree with him on the age of the earth. He would lean towards an old earth. I do not. But I think that the way that he approaches the apologetics is so rock solid. So there you go, guys. I tell you, the reason I want to do this is because that verse that I read in the very beginning, the Bible verse that I read, think about it. If you plant a field and you don't cultivate it, what's going to happen? It's going to get ugly, right? Weeds are going to grow, things are going to take over. When I was out in a farming community last week, I was speaking out in California, big farming community, and I told the farmers there, I said, guys, you got my dream job. I would love to be a farmer. You know, what a great job. You only work 2 days a year, maybe 3. One day you go out in your field and you throw all the seed out, and then you sit there through the whole summer, go do what you want to do, go hang out wherever. And then you come back in the fall and you harvest everything. And what a great way to make a living. What do you think those farmers said to me when I said that? You think they agree with that? Absolutely not. It's a lot of work. It's hard work. Well, this is the problem, guys. If we don't cultivate the fields, and quite frankly, right now, the fields are rocky and torn up and destroyed. And your generation is under such attack that those thorns and rocks just keep growing, man. I don't know how rocks breed, but it seems like they're breeding because we get more and more rocks all the time. You and I have to cultivate this field, and it's going to start with you guys. And I'm praying that maybe just one little thing from this will be a catalyst to cause you to get into a dig and want to own your faith even more. Because you are the ones that are going to be doing the hoeing. You are the ones that are going to be doing the weeding. You're the ones that are going to go out into this culture that is filled with all this mess and be able to have an impact. So I pray that hopefully I can encourage you to stay bold in the battle. You have no reason to be ashamed. You have no reason to be afraid. The God that we serve loves you so much that he died for you, even when you were saying no to him. That's how much he loves you. Even you said no. No, he still came and he died for you as an individual. Each and every one of us, because he loved us so much. And I pray that we can take that message to a culture that sure needs to know it and hear it. So sorry about how bad that was to begin with. So